The Arctic wind never stops speaking. It howls across a land of silence, a white wilderness carved by ice and time. But beneath this cold stillness, the story of a forgotten people sleeps. Long before the Inuit, long before Viking sails cut the northern seas, other hands shaped this frozen world. Who were they? What drew them to the edge of the earth, and what took them away? We journey back 4,000 years to the first human footsteps in Greenland, the Saqqaq and Dorset cultures, the lost Arctic civilizations. The story begins not in Greenland, but far across the ice in Siberia. Around 4000 BCE, small groups of hunters followed the great caribou herds across the Bering Strait. Stepping from Asia into the top of North America, these were not conquerors. They were survivors, moving through a corridor of ice and light, guided only by the stars and the scent of prey. Millennia later, one branch of these Arctic nomads would reach the farthest frontier, Greenland. Archaeologists call them the Saqqaq people, named after the site near Desco Bay, where their tools were first unearthed. Their world was harsh beyond measure. Summer sunlight lasted for months, then vanished into polar night. Yet somehow, they adapted. From bone, stone, and driftwood, they built everything they needed: weapons for the hunt, lamps for warmth, needles for stitching fur. They left no temples, no palaces, only silent tools and frozen hair, preserved in permafrost. From that hair, modern science has done the impossible, rebuilt a face from 4,000 years ago. In 2010, DNA from a single strand revealed a man with dark hair, brown eyes, and genes closer to Siberian peoples than to the later Inuit. He became known as Inuk, the man from Saqqaq, the oldest complete human genome ever recovered from the Arctic. Through him, we learned the Saqqaq weren't ancestors of the Inuit. They were a completely separate migration, one that vanished without a trace, long before the Inuit arrived. Imagine arriving in Greenland's western coast, 2500 BCE, no metal, no woodlands, no fire except driftwood and oil from seals. Yet they made homes low, oval huts, covered in hides, anchored with stones to withstand the Arctic wind. Their lamps burned seal fat, giving light enough to sew furs by night. They hunted seals through breathing holes, caught Arctic char in summer rivers, and followed reindeer herds across the tundra. Every season demanded precision. One wrong move, and the cold would claim them. Unlike later Inuit hunters who used bows, the Saqqaq relied on spears and harpoons of bone and chipped chert. Their craftsmanship was astonishing, tiny blades sharper than surgical steel, shaped with bare hands and patience. Each artifact whispers of a people who mastered survival where survival seemed impossible. The Arctic was a land of extremes, a place where survival demanded both cunning and courage. For the Saqqaq people, every day was a delicate dance with nature. From the moment the sun's pale light touched the horizon, their world came alive not with the chatter of cities, but with the whispers of wind over ice, the distant cries of birds, and the quiet splash of fish in the icy rivers. They knew the land intimately, the jagged coastlines, the hidden coves, the paths of migrating caribou were etched into memory, passed down from one generation to the next. Each knowledge of the terrain, each understanding of seasonal patterns, was a matter of life and death. Mistakes could cost warmth, nourishment, even life itself. The Saqqaq's homes were marvels of adaptation, constructed from driftwood, animal bones, and hides. The low, oval-shaped huts were designed to withstand brutal Arctic winds. Inside, the scent of seal fat lamps mingled with the aroma of drying fish and furs. These lamps were more than sources of light. They were lifelines, providing the essential heat needed to endure the long nights. By their flickering glow, Saqqaq, men, women, and children stitched together warm clothing from caribou hides, repaired tools, and prepared for the hunts that sustained their community. Hunting was an art form honed over generations. Seals, abundant along the coast, were central to their diet, providing meat, fat, and materials for clothing and tools. The Saqqaq were skilled at reading the ice, identifying breathing holes where seals surfaced, and striking with bond-tipped harpoons that required precision and patience. They fished the rivers for Arctic char, and in the summer, they followed the migrations of caribou across the tundra, tracking herds over vast frozen expanses. Every tool and weapon carried the imprint of careful craftsmanship. Microblades, sharpened with meticulous attention, were used in hunting and daily life. Needles fashioned from bone allowed them to stitch together furs that would keep them alive in sub-zero temperatures. Even small items, scrapers and fish hooks, were crafted for efficiency and durability, reflecting a culture where utility and survival were inseparable. Dogs were vital companions in the harsh Arctic world. While not yet fully harnessed in sled teams as the later Inuit would employ, these early companions helped with hunting and carrying loads. The bond between humans and dogs was a relationship forged through reliance and trust, each dependent on the other to navigate the unforgiving environment. Yet the Arctic was never static. Climate shifts tested the Saqqaq's ingenuity. Periods of colder temperatures, shifting ice patterns, and changes in animal migrations demanded flexibility. Communities had to adapt quickly, altering hunting strategies, moving settlements, sometimes facing scarcity that challenged the very survival of their culture. Their diet reflected both resourcefulness and necessity. Seal meat provided fat, essential for energy. Caribou offered protein and hides for clothing and shelter. Fish supplemented their nutrition, and occasional bird eggs were gathered when available. Preservation techniques were crucial. Drying and smoking meat allowed them to store food for the harsh winter months when hunting was not possible. Social structures within the Saqqaq community were guided by cooperation and shared knowledge. Each member had a role. Men and older boys typically led hunting parties. Women prepared food, maintained clothing and shelter, and taught children essential survival skills. The elders held the collective memory of the land, recounting past seasons, successful hunting strategies, and lessons from mistakes. A land where one wrong decision could be fatal, this oral transmission of knowledge was priceless. The Saqqaq also displayed early signs of ritual and symbolism. While they did not leave elaborate temples, certain artifacts suggest a spiritual dimension to their lives. Small carvings, personal adornments, and carefully placed tools hint at a worldview that recognized forces beyond the immediate practical needs. Perhaps these symbols were intended to protect hunters, honor the animals that sustained them, or mark important communal events. Despite their skill and adaptation, the Saqqaq culture faced challenges. The arrival of the Dorset culture in Greenland, combined with environmental pressures, gradually led to the decline of their settlements. By around 800 BCE, the Saqqaq population had disappeared from the archaeological record, leaving behind only the faint traces of their daily lives, their tools, and the preserved strands of hair that modern science would one day uncover. In the silent ice of Greenland, these remnants tell a story of resilience and ingenuity. They remind us that even in the harshest environments, human beings can thrive, adapt, and leave a legacy that echoes across millennia. The Saqqaq were pioneers, the first known people to carve a life out of the frozen edge of the world. And yet their story was not to end here. As the centuries unfolded, another culture would rise in their place, the Dorset bringing with them new innovations, art, and ways of life that would continue the human story in Greenland's vast and unforgiving landscape. The Dorset culture emerged as the Saqqaq disappeared, taking the frozen stage of Greenland from roughly 800 BCE to 1300 CE, unlike their predecessors. The Dorset people developed a complex relationship with the Arctic, one that combined practical survival with striking artistic expression. They were descendants of earlier Arctic migrants, yet uniquely adapted to Greenland's extreme conditions, creating a culture that would endure for over a millennium. Daily life for the Dorset was defined by movement and adaptation. Seasonal cycles dictated settlement patterns. In the summer, families would set up temporary camps near coastal waters to hunt seals, fish, and gather birds' eggs. The rich coastal waters provided not only sustenance, but materials for tools and clothing. Ivory from walruses, bones from seals, and driftwood were skillfully fashioned into harpoons, knives, and intricate carvings. Winter demanded resilience and innovation. Dorset homes, often semi-subterranean and insulated with sod and animal hides, offered protection from the brutal cold. Inside these structures, families maintained warmth through carefully tended oil lamps, which burned seal fat or whale oil. The interior spaces were intimate and efficient. designed to accommodate both daily activities and the storage of vital resources. Hunting remained central to survival. The Dorset mastered the use of sophisticated harpoon technology, employing toggling harpoons that could secure large marine mammals with remarkable efficiency. They were adept at ice edge hunting, waiting patiently at seal breathing holes, or setting up hunting blinds near known migration routes. The hunting of walruses and even polar bears required cooperation and strategy, reflecting not only technical skill but social cohesion and shared knowledge. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Dorset culture was their artistry. Unlike the Saqqaq, whose material culture was primarily functional, the Dorset left behind a rich legacy of symbolic and artistic objects. Carvings from walrus ivory, bone, and antler reveal intricate designs depicting animals, human figures, and abstract forms. Some masks and figurines suggest ritual use, possibly connected to beliefs about the spirits of animals and the forces of nature. These objects hint at a sophisticated spiritual life, one intertwined with survival, yet expressing identity and creativity. Social structure within Dorset communities appears to have been flexible, yet organized around shared labor and familial networks. While hunting parties operated cooperatively, domestic activities were meticulously managed to ensure survival during harsh winters. The transfer of knowledge was critical, as skills in carving, hunting, and constructing shelters required years of apprenticeship. Elders played a pivotal role in educating the young, ensuring the continuity of both practical skills and cultural traditions. The Dorset also left evidence of long-distance contact and trade. Certain materials and stylistic features found at sites suggest interactions with neighboring Arctic groups, possibly exchanging tools, ivory, and knowledge. These connections illustrate a network of communication and adaptation that extended across the North American Arctic, reinforcing the idea that no culture in this region existed in isolation. However, the Dorset culture, despite its sophistication, faced challenges that would ultimately lead to its decline. Climatic fluctuations, shifts in animal populations, and the arrival of new peoples, particularly the Thule. Ancestors of the modern Inuit created pressures that the Dorset could not overcome. The Thule brought advanced technologies, including dog sleds and whaling techniques, which allowed them to dominate resources and expand rapidly across the Arctic. By the 13th century, Dorset settlements began to vanish from the archaeological record. Unlike the abrupt disappearance of the Saqqaq, the Dorset decline appears more gradual, possibly involving assimilation, migration, or loss of population due to environmental stress. Yet their legacy endures in the objects they left behind: tools, carvings, and remnants of homes that speak of a people who thrived in one of the harshest landscapes on Earth. The story of the Dorset is not only about survival, it is about innovation, artistry, and the human capacity to adapt. In their carvings, we see glimpses of imagination and ritual. In their tools, the precision of a culture finely tuned to its environment. In their homes, the ingenuity required to endure centuries of ice and cold. Each artifact, each fragment of bone or ivory, carries the echoes of lives lived in harmony and struggle with the Arctic world. As we reflect on the Dorset, we recognize that human history in Greenland is layered, complex, and resilient. The Saqqaq and Dorset cultures, separated by centuries yet connected through geography and ingenuity, remind us that even in isolation, civilizations rise, adapt, and leave their mark. The Arctic was not empty when the Vikings arrived, nor when the Inuit later established dominance. It was alive with human endeavor, culture, and creativity, a testament to the indomitable spirit of people who called the edge of the world home. As the centuries progressed, the Dorset people faced forces that would ultimately reshape Greenland's human landscape. Climatic changes, subtle but persistent, altered the patterns of sea ice, animal migrations, and the availability of critical resources. Harsh winters became more unpredictable. Ice flows shifted along the coast, and the delicate balance that had sustained Dorset communities for centuries began to falter. Simultaneously, new arrivals from the west were moving into Arctic territories, the Thule people, ancestors of the modern Inuit. They brought with them advanced technologies, such as dog sleds, large-skinned boats known as umiaks, and refined whaling techniques that allowed them to exploit resources on a scale the Dorset could not match. These innovations facilitated mobility, expanded hunting ranges, and allowed the Thuli to establish permanent settlements along the coasts. Archaeological evidence suggests that the Dorset and Thuli may have coexisted in Greenland for several decades. There are sites where Dorset tools appear alongside early Thuli artifacts, indicating possible contact, exchange, or at least geographic overlap. However, the arrival of the Thuli introduced competition for critical resources. The superior maritime technology of the Thuli allowed them to hunt larger marine mammals efficiently, which increasingly constrained the Dorset's access to food and materials. Despite their adaptability and resilience, the Dorset population began to decline. Unlike the abrupt disappearance of the Saqqaq, the Dorset fate appears gradual. Some may have been absorbed into Thuli communities, while others may have migrated southward or succumbed to environmental stressors. By the 13th century, their distinct material culture vanished from the archaeological record, leaving only the legacy of their remarkable carvings, tools, and traces of dwellings beneath Greenland's ice and soil. Modern science has resurrected the voices of these long-gone peoples. DNA extracted from hair, bone, and mummified remains has revealed that the Dorset were genetically distinct from both the earlier Saqqaq and the later Inuit populations. They were a people adapted to Arctic life in their own right, deep ancestral ties to migrations across the North American Arctic from Siberia. These findings illuminate not only the pathways of human movement, but also the diverse strategies of survival developed in extreme environments. The Dorset left more than material artifacts. They left evidence of creativity and spirituality. Their ivory carvings, often depicting animals like polar bears, seals, and birds, may have held ritual significance. Some figurines show exaggerated features or abstract designs, hinting at symbolic meaning or storytelling. Masks found at sites suggest ceremonial use, possibly to honor animals or communicate with unseen forces. Through these remnants, Dorset expressed a worldview deeply intertwined with the natural environment, a recognition that survival required not only skill and strength, but respect and understanding. Greenland's landscape, harsh and unforgiving, preserved much of this history. Permafrost and cold conditions kept tools, textiles, and even hair intact for millennia, allowing scientists and archaeologists to reconstruct aspects of daily life with remarkable accuracy. These discoveries give voice to a people who lived at the edge of human possibility, whose ingenuity and resilience remain an inspiration. The narrative of the Dorset and Saqqaq cultures challenges conventional notions of civilization. Here, in the cold extremes of the Arctic, survival alone demanded sophisticated technology, social cooperation, and cultural expression. These societies were neither primitive nor simplistic. They were finely tuned to their environment, demonstrating that human innovation can flourish even in the most challenging conditions. As we trace the arc from Saqqaq to Dorset, and onward to the arrival of the Thuli and eventual Inuit dominance, a pattern emerges. Greenland has never been empty. It has always been shaped by the movement, adaptation, and creativity of its inhabitants. Each wave of settlement built upon the knowledge and experiences of those who came before, layering stories into the ice, the land, and the very fabric of history. In this frozen world, the echoes of the Saqqaq and Dorset remain, waiting to be uncovered. Each artifact, each fragment of bone, each carving tells a story of survival, adaptation, and resilience. Their lives remind us that human history is not always about cities and empires. Sometimes it is about endurance, ingenuity, and the quiet persistence of communities in harmony with their environment. For those who explore Greenland's past today, these stories offer both fascination and humility. We see civilizations that adapted brilliantly, that created art, that formed social networks, that ultimately faced the limits of nature and competition. Yet even in disappearance, their legacy endures, not only in the artifacts they left behind, but in the genetic, cultural, and environmental traces that connect the Arctic's past to its present. We bring these forgotten civilizations to light. The Arctic is a land of silence and secrets, but its stories, frozen in time, speak louder than words. And as long as there are those willing to listen, the voices of Greenland's earliest inhabitants will never be lost. The Greenland's early human history is a story of discovery, remembrance, and scientific resurrection. Long after the Dorset vanished, the land remained a frozen archive, preserving traces of human life for millennia. Modern archaeology and genetic research have allowed us to peer into the lives of these ancient peoples, reconstructing their stories with a clarity once thought impossible. Sites across western Greenland have yielded extraordinary finds. Stone tools, harpoon heads, needles, and fragments of dwellings tell us about daily life, while preserved hair and clothing provide insights into appearance, diet, and even migration patterns. Through these remnants, we can see that the Saqqaq and Dorset cultures were not isolated anomalies, but part of a broader narrative of human adaptation across the Arctic. DNA analysis has been particularly revelatory. Studies of Saqqaq remains, for example, have shown a population genetically distinct from later Inuit, originating from Siberian ancestors. This provides evidence of a migration that predates the Thule and Inuit expansions by thousands of years, confirming that Greenland's first known humans were pioneers, pushing the boundaries of human habitation into the far north. Similarly, Dorset DNA shows a population adapted to life in the Arctic, with biological markers indicating a diet rich in marine mammals and a resilience to cold environments. These discoveries also illuminate cultural practices. The artistry of the Dorset carvings, figurines, masks, figures not only skill, but a sophisticated symbolic life. These objects suggest that even in extreme environments, humans sought meaning, expression, and connection to the world around them. The Arctic was not a barren wilderness. It was a stage for human creativity, innovation, and adaptation. The lessons of these ancient cultures resonate today. They remind us that human survival is not solely a matter of technology, but of understanding and respecting one's environment. They show how societies can thrive in conditions that seem uninhabitable, relying on ingenuity, cooperation, and a deep knowledge of the land. In many ways, the Saqqaq and Dorset represent the earliest expressions of sustainable living, attuned to the rhythms of nature and the limits of their surroundings. For Greenland itself, these cultures form a foundation for its history. The Inuit, who followed, building on, and eventually surpassing the Dorset in technology and expansion, inherited a land already shaped by human presence. Their stories, however, would have been impossible without the Saqqaq and Dorset, who first tamed the ice, the snow, and the seas. As modern explorers, scientists, and storytellers, we stand at the edge of their world, uncovering artifacts, interpreting evidence, and imagining lives lived thousands of years ago. Each excavation, each strand of ancient hair, each carved figure connects us to the ingenuity and endurance of these forgotten civilizations. It is a reminder that human history is layered, complex, and often hidden beneath the surface, waiting for those willing to seek it out. Our mission is to illuminate these hidden histories. By uncovering the stories of the Saqqaq and Dorset, we honor their legacy and bring to light the ingenuity and courage of those who first ventured into the Arctic. If you have enjoyed this journey through time, make sure to subscribe, ring the bell, and join us as we continue to explore the forgotten civilizations that have shaped our world in ways both profound and subtle. Greenland's frozen landscape may seem silent, but for those who listen, it speaks of endurance, creativity, and survival against incredible odds. The footprints of the Saqqaq and Dorset remain etched in the ice and soil, silent witnesses to lives lived with skill, resilience, and vision. And as long as we uncover their stories, these civilizations will live on, not only in the artifacts they left behind, but in the inspiration they offer to every generation seeking to understand the boundless capacity of human adaptation. History is not only the story of kings and empires, it is also the story of those who lived quietly, ingeniously, and courageously in the most extreme corners of the earth. The Saqqaq and Dorset remind us that human spirit, creativity, and perseverance can flourish even where survival seems impossible. And so, their story continues, not frozen in time, but alive in our curiosity, our discoveries, and our commitment to remembering those who came before. The Arctic is no longer just a frozen wilderness. It is a testament to human resilience, a library of icebound knowledge, and a home for the voices of Greenland's first people. If you want to explore more lost civilizations, untold histories, and the stories hidden beneath the sands, ice, and forests of the world, subscribe to Arc Studio, hit the bell, and join us on the next journey into the past. Because history is everywhere, it's only waiting for someone to listen.